1, 2, 3, 1. Yes, finally. I want to say, hey, back to the internet. We're finally back to our show on Educare de Spiritus. Yes! Yes!
Hey, internet, we're finally back on our show at Educare de Spiritus. Yes!
Woo-hoo!
Yes! We're live? Yes!
This is why I like you, Mike.
Was that close enough?
Close, D.
All I gotta say is, as long as you can teach me to think, we got something to talk about.
Oh, fine.
No psychopath can teach me how to think.
All right.
All I'm gonna say, Ocean, is educate me. Educate me good, my friend.
Yeah, make us thinkify.
First of all, you gotta teach me how to correctly say education, so...
Okay.
No, you gotta sit down and teach us. Cause, like, half of America is so stupid.
Wait, hold on a second. That is based off of geographical location and the education system in that specific geographical location in its core dynamic. You can't actually make a general man, I can't even talk. You can't make a general
overgeneralization.
General overgeneralization. Thank you. Of that nature. I was tongue-tied. Pardon me. The cat had my tongue. What can I say? Not to mention
talking in dyslexia.
Wait, so let's go around.
If a cat had your tongue, what did he do with it?
What did you say?
Far. And what do you and how is your experience with education? Because today we're going around a room learning how to be a teacher and be a student.
Oh, okay.
So therefore, like, let's start out with Tony. Since I know Tony, this guy, he's great at being a teacher, and I knew it.
Oh, I am? Okay. Well, I think, I got like a favorite quote. It's like, teach me, I might remember, or show me, or like, teach me, I'll forget, show me, I might remember, but involve me, I'll understand. It's from Donald Michael Craig. I can't claim it, but I really like it. And I think that's really important, that you really have to get people involved in what they're, you're trying to convey to them. So it's not as much a teaching as it is like, you're guiding them to something they're interested in. So in that sense, you're really not a teacher, you're a guide. But if you listen, you might learn something as well. So I guess that's pretty much it.
The best way to actually view education, though, is preconceived notions are one of the most hindering effects towards a person's ability to be able to accept different paths and what they can actually learn from people of different backgrounds. I mean, because of the household you're raised in. Preconceived notions from a religious nature would be a prime example of something like that. If you have a pre-existing mindset that hinders you from understanding how another person lives, that's going to actually hinder how perceptive you are to anything from an educational standpoint.
Yeah, that goes along with the Buddhist monks, that story from the Buddhist about the teacup. It's
exactly.
Like, our tradition has that. Oh, our tradition has that. Oh, we have that too. And then the monk just pours his teacup until it starts overflowing. It's like, hey, you filled up the cup. It's overflowing. He goes, exactly. I can't put anything in your cup till you empty it.
Exactly.
All right, so I guess Mike, you want to go next? Because I know that you have experience in education before. I know Tony wants to go to college, and right now he actually is still going to college,
Yes, I do.
Well, you do have a background in education, am I correct? Larry, you...
I actually am in college. I'm a math science major.
Oh, cool.
Math science? Cool.
Yeah.
How young you are, and introduce your experience on education. Like, how was it? What was your best teacher, and how did they teach you?
My best teacher was Mr. Honors. He was my 5th grade general studies teacher. He basically was It was a public school in elementary, and that was one of the first real experiences I had that sort of helped bring me to have a love for the sciences, just to experiment and actually question how the world works around. That was where I developed and sort of the mindset of questioning the universe can sort of be the link to it, and the fundamental basis for it was actually started in his class.
Okay.
I would have to say my best teacher was probably in 10th grade. When I first saw it, I thought his name was Cujo. And he was a coach, so we never really called him Mr. Cujo. We called him Coach Cujo. But it wasn't Cujo, it was Cujo, eventually we found out. And he was very much so into the whole involving people in the conversation. And, you know, it wasn't as much teaching as having discussions. And we learned from each other. The students actually learned from each other a lot of different things that we didn't know about one another. And one thing that he brought in, which I thought was kind of edgy, because at the time, you know, I'd been raised like a Baptist fundamentalist, but he brought in the Quran and was, yeah, really, he basically just showed, you know, there was some people in there that were Islamic as well, so, and it just showed like a completely different view of everything, and then he's like, now what do they have in common? You know, so whenever we got to that point, I realized that there was like a bunch of stuff that was commonalities throughout like different religions throughout the world, and they all have their own wisdom.
Anything that's a monotheistic based religion, you can actually find at its core dynamic the base template, at least the big three. You can actually find at its core dynamic the moral standpoint it comes from is pretty similar. That's why it's pretty surprising why there's such a rudimentary need to fight other religions that are so similar to your own when it comes down to the whole religious front. That's something that's always dumbfounded me and somewhat surprised me from at least a theological standpoint.
Well, they fight over the details.
Not to mention, that's something that's hindered. Let's use the U.S., for example. Staying on the topic of education, I mean, if you look at how a school exists in the Bible Belts, that's something that is prime evidence for how a preconceived theological mindset can actually hinder your ability to actually just learn or be educated from a education standpoint. I mean, look at the whole debate that's still going on about evolution in this country. I mean, Darwin published his book a little over 100 years ago, and there's still people in this country that actually don't believe that evolution is the way that mankind came in, or this species actually came into existence on this planet.
Well, I believe that this is
go ahead, Daniel.
I believe that this is a good argument for keeping religion not necessarily out of schools, but we shouldn't teach our young that one particular way of thinking, religious thinking, is the truth and the only truth. You know,
see, Daniel, I would actually agree with you to a standpoint with that, but I think that the way that Tony was sort of one of his best educational experiences from 10th grade would actually be a prime example of something that would actually work. Bring in all information to the table and basically make it an immersive experience for the student body itself. And basically make it an eye-opening experience for how the world really works. Make it a world-finding experience for the student that's actually studying the subject itself. Let them actually set the pace in which they educate themselves. Because
on the one hand, you could bring to the table all of the major world religions. On the other hand, you could bring none of them.
That's from a theological standpoint, or from a standpoint of philosophy.
But to bring just one and to teach that is the truth, I think that's where we're going wrong.
Oh, I would somewhat agree with that. I would say it's more of a gray area than black and white, but I do agree.
Well, it's
Right.
just like a friend of mine. He's recovering from doing like alcohol and drug abuse, and he's really understanding that God's in his life. And I was like, that's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. And you know, that is he. I'm sure that he's more than likely just getting exposed to one viewpoint, and that's what I told him. I said, but at the same time, realize that you know that God is very much so active in your life and wants the best for you. But you also have to consider that God's been doing this a while, and God is not religion.
Right, right. And so, like, we'll continue on going on around the room. We'll go back to that later. So, Insect, you're next. So, can you explain to us, like, some of your experience with education and, like, introduce yourself to the audience a little bit?
Oh, nothing special. I mean, I was brought up under the Church of England, so a Protestant Christian. Although my mother was a Catholic and my grandmother was a Catholic. And we had to go to church like once a week as part of being in the school, you know. But I never really took to that. I never really believed in it, even though it was being constantly shoved down my throat. I've always been a free thinker. And I think I've done the right thing by being a bit skeptical about it all. But some people, I think it can damage them if they're taught just one system of belief, because you always feel like you're being judged. You always feel like there's only one right way to act, and I don't think that's the case. I think that each individual is given consciousness so that they can decide for themselves, not so that someone else can decide for them.
Oh, yeah. That happens all the time. Like, even on my end, that happens. And even, okay, then, oh, I almost forgot when you brought that up. Deanna, do you have anything to say? Try to introduce yourself to the audience
All right.
and your experience in education. Some of your best and worst.
Okay. Hello, I'm Deanna, and I am truly the misfit when it comes to schooling. Like, honestly, I'm the teacher's honorary bitch. I am the worst student you can meet. And according to my mom, I'm the student from hell. So, much to what my mom told me today, thank you very much, Mom, for calling me the student from hell. I can say that a lot of school systems have tried to teach me. I've been in homeschooled, I've been private schooled, and I had to switch schools about 9 times in my life. And that was like 9 times where I made friends, where I thought, oh, this is the school for me, where I thought, oh, you know, maybe I can learn something here. But like each and every time I've been in a school, it's either I've had problems with the principal or anyways, long story short, with education, besides the fact that teachers hate my guts, yay! No, just kidding. Besides that, you know, I just try to soak up the most I can, even though I'm a very difficult learner, because like I don't get things the way that most people do, because like sometimes it takes me a long time, and like as my brother used to say, you're slower than a pissed up snail going backwards, and that's basically that's
Oh,
that's basically how I learned, because like it takes me a long time to understand something or get a message through to me. So, but I can tell you, I teach better than I learn, which is really backwards and messed up, because like. But I think the best teacher I've ever had was like Mr. Josh, and he was my science teacher in Christie Academy. And honestly, Mr. Josh was the funniest, coolest, youngest teacher in the school, and like our science class was like we would study 3 times a week, and then we would watch movies the rest of the days.
Oh wow.
But they were not just movies. But they were not just movies. They were scientific movies that taught us about the universe. And so, like, I've never put my head inside a textbook because, like, that was not my teaching style. So I've always been taught through videos and programs and movies. So it's actually very rare for me to learn out of a textbook. But I would say Mr. Josh, like, he was just awesome as a teacher. And he just taught me the wonders of the world and how science could be and how science can be fun and I was never really in a public school system, so I've never understood how class worked. I've never understood others. I've My classroom was always 24 kids or less. And so I'm not really the person to talk about education because, like, the truth is, I'm still learning myself, and I think everyone is a teacher and a student at the same time. I'm teaching you as you're teaching me, and I'm learning from you as you're learning from me. Because in reality, we're all learning from each other. And, you know, there are the kids that are the misfits that don't do great in school, but they're sure fun after school. So as far as education goes, to me, grade matters don't really matter. Like, grades don't matter, report cards don't matter. The only thing that matters at the end of the day is what you learned and what you got out of it. And what really matters is when you graduate from school and say, yes, I did it.
Well,
And that's so.
yeah, that's exactly what like a lot of times school tend to fail to do. It's like a lot of time we just focus so much on grades and bam, just forget about okay, what's the purpose of all this?
Exactly. And like what you find a lot of teenagers asking is, why am I doing this work? What am I doing? How do I do it? And honestly, it's getting ridiculous. I have I have like these kids that I babysit for, and they're like 10, and they're like, I need help with my algebra. And I'm like, what? You're 10. You don't have algebra. And they're like, yes, we do. Here, I need to practice this, this, and this. And then I just look at the paper. I'm like, what are they teaching me these days? When I was 10, I was reading books.
Oh my God.
There's nothing wrong with learning a bit of algebra.
Hmm. Wait, so that is just one part of the story. So let's figure out who else is having good or bad experiences. Like Catherine, are you there? Woohoo! Can you speak to us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so can you speak to us about your experience with education? Like, I know that you don't have a screen on you right now, but like, the audience would definitely love to learn about what does it look like to be in so-called the gates of hell.
I'm not sure what we're doing yet. I'm kind
Well,
of lost what we're describing and where we're going here.
uh, our involvement with education, that means like our lives in school. You get it?
Okay, well, I went back to school as a much older adult to get a college education, which was very interesting on a work-study program, and
Oh wow.
I was a substitute teacher for years. I've got various experience with education. I taught grades kindergarten through 12th grade, and that is quite an eye-opener.
Hmm. Okay. What about you, Khadija? Because since parts, I know that you're somewhat a college student. Am I correct?
I'm a pharmacist, so I went through the 6-year doctor of pharmacy program. So I graduated like almost 2 years ago.
All right. So can you explain it to the audience what the education system looks like in there? Because I heard it's like pretty rigorous, but not in a good way. Really.
Yeah, definitely not. Like it's they just bombard you with information and you kind of just regurgitate it mostly. And you're just stressing yourself out. You're killing yourself to take the exam and learn all these different subjects, like complex subjects, and I mean, at the end of the day, I am thankful for what I went through because it helped me see the BS through it. But yeah, I mean, it definitely sucked. I think if you ask anyone that went through the program, they're gonna say, yeah, it sucked. It's like, it's like 6 years of hell, really. But
Oh,
in terms of like teachers and stuff, what?
yeah. I just say, oh wow, that's a lot, for you.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So since we did go around the room and introduce ourselves, and Jenna's going to be back. Well, let's let's get started on what is education. Because of course we know for sure that we should be learning something by the end of the day, but what exactly are we trying to learn? Like for example, if I were to go to a math school or science school or medical school, what are we learning? Like half the time I don't even know what it is. Hey guys have any ideas about this? Like tell
We're
me.
learning someone else's knowledge from another person who has absolutely no idea what they're talking about that over explains stuff way too far.
Well, that depends on the teacher, really. But yeah, uh, there are actually. I think it has to do with when you're educating. If it's something that you choose to do, you're basically expanding knowledge of yourself. You know? And you're doing it through what they call what most people say is knowledge, but it's not somebody else's knowledge. It's their assumed knowledge. They believe what somebody else has said because they've got a piece of paper or they've got 3 letters after their name, but it really still is just assumed knowledge until you make it your own, until you actually do the work. It is not personal knowledge. It only is assumed knowledge, and you have to take that into consideration whenever you're educating yourself.
So here's something that I just read up on the spirituality. They also say that when you're just learning something or experimenting or creating a theory, it's just you learning or understanding it versus you experiencing the theory or whatever concept it is the way it is. That's what we call real knowledge. Like to a certain extent, like I believe that should be the basis of our schools, but somehow like how come like
There seems to be a problem with the audio.
Yeah, you got cut off a little bit.
okay, you guys hear me better now? All right, so the question is, it's like we learn to know things where it's all about learning to experience things the way it is. In education today, it's almost like as though you are just learning the theories about speculations and guesses from other people. However, the moment that you experience it, that's the moment you got knowledge. The only thing is that if we are seeking to know, then why bother learning the theories?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
What I just don't
Well,
get
how
is
do you experience it? How do you experience it? How are you gonna have your students experience it? What's the way to do that?
Well,
They already are. We
What
already,
what I was thinking about whenever. Oh, go ahead, Daniel.
we already experience things the way that they are. It's just when you start putting labels and stuff on it, it's just complicating it more, isn't it? We're already privy to exactly the way it is.
That is true. One thing
Excuse
that I
me.
think about, hold on just one second. One thing I think about theory and as far as labels go is that that's exactly what it is. A theory is a label within itself. A theory is like somebody's observation or, you know, their perception that they're wanting to share with somebody who maybe further on down the line can either prove it or disprove it, but at least take it into consideration.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And really, labels make everything more difficult. And the reason why people give things labels is because they like to understand and they like to say, oh, this is red, we'll call it red. This is blue, we'll call it blue. And the reason why they put labels on it is so they can understand it and identify it better. But technically, in reality, what are we trying to understand? If we're trying to teach someone, you know, if we're trying to teach someone, we have to base off of what we know. We can't just pull something out of the bag and say, oh, here's what a textbook knows. Here's what I learned in school. No, you have to teach it off of your own personal experience. I understand school is school, and I understand that you get most of your lessons from a textbook, but in depth, what would happen? Here's a new idea. What would happen if we all just had no school and we didn't have to learn half the things we do in order to survive?
That'd be boring.
That's an impossible question to answer.
I think it's important to. Oh, go ahead to teach the teacher. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, I think the people that really want to learn, that are really into science or really into math, will naturally pick it up themselves. The people who are truly into the arts or into music or into whatever, like they'll go into that themselves. Like maybe, you know, maybe that's what would happen. I don't know if that's too much of an idealistic picture, but.
Well, with me, what I think is just the basic R's. After that, you don't need anything else. You know, it's up to you what you want to pursue. Reading, writing, and arithmetic. They call it the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, but it's obviously spelt wrong that way, but that's what it is. You know, you have reading, you have writing, and you have math. Once you get the basics of reading and of writing and of math, being able to actually write letters and to read and be able to like keep count of certain things. I believe after that, you know, you really should just, you know, they should let you go and then do what you want to do after that. But you do have to have those basic three.
Yeah, so like elementary school, and then after that, you kind of go on your own way.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And in fact, Catherine brought up a good point right here. She said that there's a lot of wrong info in the textbooks. I don't think you really started learning until you look into stuff yourself. Exactly. In fact, that is something that a lot of times if you were to go to college and like expect to know these stuff, you have to personally try it yourself. That's why they have credit hours for a reason. You know, it's just for you. It's an experimentation where you're trying to figure things out on your own and experience it the way it is. If you don't do that, you're basically just regurgitating information. And that's what happens in many career training colleges, like pharmacy, lawyers, therapists, you name all the occupations.
Medicine, yeah, for sure.
Is this not
It's
how...
like... Yeah, go ahead and say.
Is that not how the Nazis got people on their side? They would change all the school curriculum in such a way that all that they were taught is the Nazi dictation. You know, you can get an entire nation on your side that way.
Oh, yeah.
What's really important is that what's being taught in these places is as close to the truth as possible, not indoctrination.
That is exactly what I was trying to get here. It's like this that a lot of people like that's what a lot of colleges nowadays are going through. Is like half the time when we like, for example, I know Catherine goes to college, Tony goes to college, I go to college.
I don't.
Half the time, half the time, I like when I go to college. Half the time, we only were taught in the textbooks. But luckily, my college they actually have programs where you have to work, where you go out in the field and you learn from the agencies that you work for.
Yep.
And I found that
Yeah.
a lot more in teaching than you having to sit in a classroom. Like, for example, if I were to be a social worker, I need to learn how to counsel people. If you don't give me that skill in the first place, forget about all the theories. I'm not going to be able to do it effectively. That's what I just don't get. Is like, how did our school become this way? Like, they just throw out all the theories and expect us to learn it. Any ideas?
Well, people put forward policies, don't they? Think
I mean,
this should be taught, this should not be taught.
how
Not
long has
necessarily
this current?
Sorry, not necessarily always for the best. And now I'm gonna let you talk.
Okay. Khadija?
I was saying, how long has this current like education system been running? I feel like it hasn't been that long.
In fact, it has been like about 60 years in this country. Yeah, 60 years to be more exact. Like we first started having our massive amount of development of colleges all over the nation like around 60 years ago, and then all of a sudden there's a massive amount. Like the moment information start blasting, that's the moment we start having those places where you're just regurgitating information.
Do you
So
think
like
that like the people who developed this type of program, do you think they intentionally did it in a way where like kind of like machines regurgitating, or do you think they had good intentions in the beginning?
okay, so like I don't know if you guys would agree with this, Khadija. If you can have anything to say, just let it know. And even you, Catherine, is that when it comes to education, we all started out something very good. It was an intention to spread information. That's what a college is. However, just like every other businesses, everything just get caught up into money. That's the key thing that literally blasts that quality of everything.
True.
It's
Very
like,
true.
for example, pharmacy. I've seen people in pharmacy where half the time, if you were to walk into a pharmacist or go to medical school, the first thing they will teach you is drugs. That's all. Like, think about it. You've been taught like 200 drugs to market. That's a lot for actually to cure how many diseases? I have no idea.
Oh, you're
But
taught like hundreds and hundreds of drugs, yeah.
and yeah, so how many people do you cure out of the 100 drugs?
You don't cure any. You just treat the symptoms. The that's the BS behind it. They don't teach you to cure the patient. They teach you to. I mean, okay, sometimes some like very rarely do they talk about cures. Mostly it's about treating.
It's internal medicine do that a lot, but besides that field, I don't see any others that would be willing to teach anything besides curing the patient. That's what I'm talking about. I know what you're
Well,
talking
you
about,
got a
you know.
little like cut off.
Yeah. So besides the internal medicine field, I don't see any other medical field that would do the same.
That would do the same of what? Of curing a patient?
Oh yeah, like I've known a lot of doctors that are actual MDs that are like internal medicine specialists. They are very good at curing, but in that field, I have no idea because it's almost like a dead end, you know.
Hmm. Okay.
So, what about your experience, Deanna? Like, in fact, I know that, like for example, you went to the doctor once, and I heard that you do have. I know that you have epilepsy and that you don't want to talk about it, but like,
No, I never said I didn't want to talk about it. I'm willing to talk about it to anyone who's willing to listen.
yes, and like tell everyone about like your experience with epilepsy and how the doctor tries to help you, and how his education really helps you, or is he?
Well, first off, I had my first seizure days before I turned 1. So I've been having grand mal seizures since I was like a little kid. And, you know, it was very scary for my mom. And I grew up learning about how the brain works and how the seizures start. And, like, once you have one seizure, there's just no turning back. There's just no turning back from there. And, you know, I've grown up around doctors and doctor appointments. And there were times where I was in the hospital where I was like, oh, will this ever, ever end? Because, like, there was a pattern. It was like, I got a seizure, then the doctors are like, we have to raise your meds. And now I'm like, but I want to be med-free. And they're like, too bad, your seizures are too bad, and they're too risky, and they're too high. And so
Definitely tough.
Mm-hmm. So,
and
so yeah, like, can you also explain to us, like, when they say to you that it's bad like that, can you explain like, how bad was it? And
well, let's put it this way. I was put on life support a few times. That's how bad it was.
oh wow,
I was put on a ventilator. I was hooked up to machines. They would hook up IVs. You name it, I've been through it.
okay. So what about that's just one part of the story, but like, how come they told you to do that? Was it because like, were they taught this way to put you on that meds, or what
There
happened?
was no choice because back then I would get seizures every time I was sick. I would get seizures when I would go out in public. I would get seizures when I got angry, when I got sad, when I got disappointed. I got seizures at almost everything that triggered it.
Hmm. Oh wow.
And like those seizures, the worst kind of seizures I ever got was like the worst kind that I would get is like I would have one seizure that would last 20 minutes and that would wipe my memory clean of 3 years. So whatever I learned or experienced during those 3 years, it wiped my memory clean.
Oh wow. So yeah, this is what I so far
That's scary.
is that when I look at how doctors cure problems or how they solve medical problems, half the time like you're only given a pill and that's
I was
it. You know?
I was given 1,500 milligrams
You
of,
got me.
I'm not kidding you.
Like I bet you
Of
guys
what?
here that's killer machine right here.
I
Like
survived death.
yeah, like it's a very powerful drug, almost like an antipsychotic drug to cure epilepsy.
Which drug were you on?
I was on Depakote for
Oh,
1,500 milligrams.
Uh-huh.
And Like, it would cause me to overeat. It would cause me to,
Kind of
like, not
numbs
have...
your brain, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like that's the thing, guys, is like that's what I just don't get about like education, especially in the medical industry, where first you go into school, you get your bachelor's degree in science, and then later on, when you want to heal someone, they taught you only 1 week of nutrition about, like for example, about epilepsy, autism, ADHD, or any of those crap. And then later on, they taught you like how many years? 3 years of medical stuff, and later on you were supposed to be requiring a residency. That's a lot. And yet, when when the medical industry were to ask like, how many people did you cure? They said zero.
Yep.
And it really sucks because you would think in this day and age that doctors would come into idea. Like, maybe for once they'd be like, oh, I know how to cure autism. I know how to cure... Like, honestly, how many times would you meet a doctor that says that they know how to cure something and actually do it?
Mm.
I feel
Okay.
like you would only find that in the non-traditional path.
Oh
You
yeah.
wouldn't find that in the mainstream.
Like, here's the thing, guys. Like, I want to mention this to the audience and to those of you out there watching this. Like, please look into this as part of your degree plan. If you happen to run into this for your educational degree, look up naturopathic medicine. It's a form of medicine that has
I
been created
know.
10 years ago. That field has been developing, and it's a form of, it's almost like a medical doctor in by itself. The only difference is it looks for the cause, and second of all, it uses nature as the curing mechanism for your epilepsy or whatever problem it is. And the residency is actually optional, and I'm actually working towards getting my degree in that.
Awesome. I love the field of naturopathic medicine like that. I hope one day like I can use my degree for that. Maybe one day I'll go back to school, but if not, like I hope I can use my traditional pharmacy degree to work in that field. I mean, I think I might be able to, but we'll see.
Here's the funny thing. If you guys have a master's degree and you want to go back to naturopathic medicine, it only takes like, if your classes don't
We have
expire
a doctor
in like
actually.
10 years, then you're still good to go. You can still go back to college and get your doctorate in there. I had one person in my family
Yeah.
who, yeah, I had one person who's in my family who wants to go back to school, and like they actually major in something else, but then later on they switch over. They can do that. But going back to what we are talking about,
I
education.
think
That is what education is supposed to be, you know? It's about implementing, and it's about effectiveness.
Well, for someone to
yeah, it's
be
about being enthusiastic about what you're learning.
for someone to be educated, is it not just a question of living life? That is your education, isn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely. And in fact, that is what like we should be living by. Is like, if we were to create an educational system, we should not just simply learn it out of the book or just experimenting it. We should live it.
Yeah.
On our own body and see what happens.
Well, we do live it. But people trying to tell us that it's one way when we haven't even experienced that, then you're not going to believe it, are you? There's no reason to.
And like, that's another thing is like, oh, all right, so here's where it gets really funny here. I wonder how many of you hated homework, but I know how effective homework is, but like, how many of you guys hate it?
I did.
Yeah,
I can
think,
tell you what.
Yeah.
Wait, I have a really funny story. One time, my teacher gave me like 6 packs of homework, and she's like, and she was like, do this, bitch, do this.
Do this by tomorrow.
and wait for it. And so I took the 6 packs of homework, looked at the teacher, and said, "Teacher, you never taught me this. I don't understand. Why don't you give me the instructions?" And she looked at me with this really snarky remark, like, "Read it yourself, bitch." And you know what I did with her work? I took her 6 packs of homework, took a shredder, and shredded in front of the teacher. And I almost back in the face.
Oh my god.
Oh wow.
That's
Oh,
how much I hate homework. I took the teacher's homework and shredded it in her own shredder in front of her face.
Congratulations, brave lass. Congrats.
So I think that was making a statement.
but Deanna has a point, guys. Like, think about it. What homework is supposed to be a place where you experiment. It's almost like a virtual experiment. What you learn now. Hey,
Yeah,
Michael.
well, one thing,
Hi, Michael.
hey,
Enjoy the pate.
one thing I've noticed about homework is a lot of the times all it is just busy work. You know, it's just to keep you busy. And I think it mainly is just so that the teachers will have work up for themselves to do, because they have to grade it on top of that. But it all has to do with numbers in a book, and I don't think that people are numbers. You know, so I mean, yeah, I can see how if you spent time with each other on like an individual basis, but that, I mean, we have to be like realistic as well. If a class has 50 students in it or 40 students in it, it's hard for that one-on-one situation. The best thing that a teacher can do is try to get a feel for who in that classroom isn't getting it, because they don't want to look stupid and say, "Hey, I don't understand," you know, so they kind of pretend or fake it.
True.
So it's really hard to do that, especially when they get homework, you know, and they can't do it because they don't know how to. So it really, and I have, unfortunately, hopefully things are changing a little bit toward the better from what I understand, as far as it not being as much stress on like the grading system, but it's more like educating more so than it is stressing as far as keeping a D average, or if this many students don't pass, you're not going to get the federal money from the government or anything like that. So they stress and they tamper with the books and stuff and it's just wrong. It's wrong for the students, and what they really need to do is just get better teachers, and I think that's very important. That the teachers that we have in schools are, you know, good people. You know, that their heart's in it. That's what they want to do. They're just not trying to draw a paycheck.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Yeah, go ahead and say.
Okay. Why isn't pantheism or panentheism taught in schools?
That is exactly what I was about to ask also, because I just don't understand why in the world does religion got thrown out of schools nowadays, and especially it's supposed to be about spirituality.
Well, it's not that religion is out of schools. And I wouldn't mind if it was. It's just that here in England, at least, there are some schools that they teach one sect of Christianity, and then that's all it. Religion stops there. And I think that's dangerous for the minds of young people.
He made a good point here. It's like they didn't want to teach our religions; they only want to teach Christianity. Well, think about it. England, Vatican, the Vatican Church. How many countries that have Christianity as their primary religion? Like, I don't know, but
Most, I think.
that is what we call proselytization. Simple as that. It's just the state being proselytizing the religion.
So who is this Jesus guy? I don't fucking know him. Sorry, I swore.
It's okay, and in fact, I don't even know who
Actually,
he is.
Jesus was an ascended master. I've kind of studied his life as much as possible outside of the Biblios, the Bible, the sacred book of Christianity and some of Judaism. But if you actually follow and try to investigate where he went, he was called Isa in the Quran. And
Yeah,
there's stories of Isa throughout the world. If you follow it, he went over to Tibet. There's a faith over in India that practices his real teachings, not this corrupt stuff that they teach as far as what Christianity quote unquote is. But he was an ascended master, just like Buddha, Lao Tzu, Kuan Yin. There were so many of them. Muhammad. They were all ascended masters. So, and they're teaching the way that. And it's just like in that one the scripture quote. I don't really like quoting scriptures, but it's perfect example of what Jesus was trying to teach. He says, "Know ye not that your body is the temple of God, and the Spirit of God dwelleth within it." That is so Buddhist. That is so Buddhist. Oh my God! Look within. Always, yes. That is the message of the ascended masters. Look within for your personal truth. It is there. You just have to be quiet and listen. Meditate. That's what people always stress in Christianity about praying, but nobody really meditates. And meditate is one of the main things.
Know thyself, and thou shalt know my Father.
Absolutely, yes.
here's what I just don't get. Like I don't know if you guys realize this, but who in here realize that most of these ascended masters, they are also teachers in this world, where they also assign homework for their students. I wonder how did they teach their students in such a way that was so amazing that most of them reach enlightenment. That is weird.
By example, mostly, I guess.
Like what example exactly, Khadijah? Because there's many.
Okay, so I guess teaching their teachings by word, but then embodying them too, and showing others how to embody them. And then when you embody those teachings and you see how you feel, maybe that's how they learn, like through the experience of what they're teaching.
Okay, so I think you brought up a good point here. This is something that I learned that I don't know if you guys realize in psychology, counseling, life coaching, they did teach you that in order to be a good person, you have to learn how to embody what you teach to your clients. That's what it is. When you counsel someone, when you ask them to do something, you're standing beside their values and being consistent about it. That's what a lot of times when I go to life coaching school, they always emphasize that.
It's a teaching by example.
Yeah.
And what's really funny, Tony, is when you brought up the fact about Jesus and how he lives through example. Here's something that I realized is that in each and every one of us humans, we have what we call a mirror neuron. That research shows that if you were to embody for example, an abstract concept, like for example, compassion, by just doing it, people start doing it with you. It's weird, but it's true. Like people automatically can feel it by themselves, like as though they're doing it.
Well, it goes back to resonance, but that's of course more of a scientific nature of it. But that's what it is. Whenever you live your life as an example, people feel that and they see it and they recognize it as what they want to do. And it does. It makes your world a better place, even if it's just a small world. I live in a house with 4 people, and I've noticed that since I have been more honest with myself and loving, that's reflected back. So creates a better environment.
And like
it maybe goes back to an idea that Carl Jung, the psychologist, he had this idea of the collective unconscious, where we're not consciously aware of the connections that we have to each other, but we are intrinsically connected to each other anyway.
well, that is true.
Einstein wrote something about that. I'll talk about it here in a minute.
That just bring it up, Tony. Here's the funny thing. By quantum mechanics, we're already interconnected. Because think about it. The energy that is made up in this universe, that made of all of us in this room right now, even the tablet that I'm sitting right in front of myself, they're all made up of the same type of ingredient. Energy. We're made up of the same information. It's a hologram.
Well, you got to understand, for most scientists, saying the word God is a no-no, because that discredits them among their peers, among the field of the scientific method and scientific knowledge. But this is what Einstein said. A human being is part of a whole, called by us universe, a part limited in space and time. He experiences himself, or she experiences herself, their thoughts and feelings as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness, or her consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from the prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty.
That is what exactly. That's exactly what the world needs to know, because that's somehow when we are looking at the universe and how it's created, and like a lot of people were awed by its beauty, but somehow it's almost like as though someone look into it and say it's like the divine is making it, but they don't realize it's us.
It's pretty much like he said, the collective, and what he called it, is and it's just like widening our circle of compassion. So, and that's like not just like loving your family, but loving everybody unconditionally, no matter what. Period. And when you do that, it's just like Michael Lloyd said in that blog that I keep bringing up. You bring people into that awareness. There is no more judgmental. You see yourself and other people, but you don't judge that person that you see. You love that person you see, and it makes you a better, more expressive and versatile person. That is basically shining forth all the colors of the rainbow.
And here's the thing with that. Like, I did make a metaphor, like just because your favorite color is purple doesn't mean that the other colors are ugly or that the other colors aren't still there. And people, when they have this awareness, that is a sense of empowerment. And people can twist that empowerment as any source of power into being like, oh, okay, so it's all right to be... it's okay for war to happen. It's okay for a murderer to kill other people. That unconditional love of self is not the same thing as saying everything that's happening is okay. There's a difference, and it's kind of a paradox.
Oh yeah, and like here's the thing, Michael, is like how do we bring about the power of education to help people know this? Because a lot of people sometimes they might accept things blindly, but some people are willing to test it,
Well, I think it has to do with educating your perspective. If it's unconditional love, is love. You're not really going. Okay, you can unconditionally love everybody, but at the same time, love is love. It's not killing. You know, if you are yourself if you visit yourself or you run into yourself in another existence during this lifetime, which could be possible, then how are you going to treat you? Are you going to try to create a better place for you, not only in this lifetime but any other lifetimes that you come in contact with yourself?
Oh,
Should
yeah.
should it really take any education for people to realise that it's a bad idea to kill each other?
That is something I just don't get, It's like, how come you need to go get an education to, like, learn that to kill is not the great idea?
It's known. It's known in the heart. I mean, it's like the truth that's there. You know it.
Yeah, we don't need
Already
we don't need a fucking university degree to
No.
know that killing people is a bad idea.
Right. Hey, Sherman.
Oh, I have no
Even
idea.
if having a university degree, that doesn't mean that you're gonna figure out that killing is a bad idea. You could be really educated and still be involved in like a religion that believes in jihad, and you'll still be killing people no matter how educated you are. I
Yeah,
think.
but I'm not. I think everyone here is pretty much a free thinker. When we don't involve ourselves too much with any particular religion.
I just came across
Yeah.
this link discussing what we're talking about, so I put it up for y'all. I just found this.
Okay, so Catherine made a very good point here about this is about unschooling. This This said, at least not in a traditional compulsory watch the clock till the bell rings kind, where yes, I have to agree, there is a time where in our history we do have moments where there's a lot of standardized testing going around, and especially like around my era, like I don't know if it's happening around yours, but like in 1993 or in 2000, I remember when I was a 9-year-old, I also had to go through a lot of testing where they make me see if I pass the tax test, or they make me, if I don't pass, I had to fall back on a grade. And a lot of my friends, some of my friends who are so-called unconventional, they ended up falling back and delaying 1 year of their graduation from high school or that prison, which is like, I don't get it. How in the world when in the world did this system of enslavement got into testing where it's all about trying to make the performance, but not about the process?
Oh, I touched upon that earlier. It's called government funding.
And that's what I just don't get about the government. It's like, how come you want to fund schools that are like, they're performing well, while those who are like, for example, those who are actually helping people learn better? How do you measure?
Yeah, you're basically being disciplined, for doing what you should be doing, instead of you're getting penalized for not having the numbers that you're supposed to have. But the ones that that are, I think there was a couple of movies that was like that. Stand By Me was one of them, and there was another one as well. But the students' grades increased like 80%, but they still didn't meet the national level. But did they learn anything? Come on, think about it. 80% increase in education awareness and how they study, and their grades went up. I mean, of course they did. That is like an incredible, I mean, that's awesome. That is so beautiful that those kids was able to, improve themselves so that they could just go and learn what they wanted to learn and be involved in themselves and what they want to do with their life. And I think that's totally awesome. But no, it wasn't good enough. So, I mean, that's
Tony,
terrible.
like,
That's absolutely terrible. But I understand that the education system is changing, and they are working on that. I don't know if it's too little, too late, or not. But at least they do have the attention on it now more so than they did 10 years ago.
Well, Tony, like, can you describe to us like what like some of the schools that said they improved their students by 80%? How did they do it? Because here's what I noticed is that there's this one time I read up on the education index created by the United Nations. They say that out of all the developed countries in the world that has the best education, United States ranked number 25, Canada ranked number 6, while Finland used to be ranked number 75. Now it went up to number 1.
I think it has to do. I mean, to be totally honest, at least the movie that I watched was based on a true story. It came to a point where the teachers that they got cared, actually gave a shit, and they listened to their students. They listened to, well, how come your grades went down in this certain time period? Well, there was problems at home. So they had to deal with each individual student in that particular situation to let them know that somebody out there actually cared, that somebody actually cared about their well-being and them improving themselves. And if it's all just a numbers game, kids aren't stupid.
Oh, yeah. Especially 8-year-olds or even middle school students. Oh, my God, yeah.
These were high schoolers, but they definitely aren't stupid. They could tell whenever they were just getting shoved through the system. And they thought, well, nobody else cares, why should I? And then one person cared.
So now, okay.
I believe that there's something about kids, young children, that is destroyed by the idea of having to move into adulthood. And like, kids understand magic practice a lot better than older people ever could, because we lose that mystery, that sense of wonder.
That's true.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because we're shut down so much, from
Now
expressing ourselves.
here's what Tony brought up, like from the last show, that I guess you guys I don't know if you missed it, but an interesting point he made that when you first got your bachelor's degree or your high school diploma, your creativity is like about this high. All right, everyone can see it? By the time you get your PhD, let's say your master's degree is about this much. And by the time your PhD, you're not even seeing my fingers off this screen right now. That's how low your creativity gets when you get your PhD. And
that's just like because they stifle it. They stifle that creativity. They say, do this, do this, do this. Don't think for yourself. Do what we tell you, and that is so wrong. And whenever you lose that creativity, you do. It does stifle your ability to manifest things in your life. And I think it's important that people embrace and keep the heart of a child within, and recognize that children are not stupid. They aren't. They are ready to learn and willing to learn. But just because they are ignorant in certain fields that you are not, doesn't make them more or less intelligent.
Now here's the funny thing, guys. It's like, here's what I noticed, is that if you, this is from my experience in being a counselor for a while, or listening to people, is that when I start doing listening stuff where I help give insights to a person who's like 27-year-old or 30 or sometimes 40 versus a teenager, I found out that the teenager are more receptive to that, to the things that I say than those who are older. That's what's weird. But how come?
I think it's because, that is a great link. But I think it has to do with once they get older, they're taught to look down on those that are younger than them. And, well, you don't know as much, you're just a kid. Whatever. That is so untrue. You can learn stuff from a kid. I mean, parents learn from things from their kids all the time. And there's not one parent that can't say they haven't learned something from their kids. Period. If they're being honest. Because it happens every day. So yeah, but a lot of adults, that don't really experience that, and I think that's one important thing about kids. I've never had it, but I've never had kids, but I have observed it. I've seen it. I've talked to other adults that have shared that information about how much they learn from their kids. And it is just totally awesome that there's people in the world like that, but there's a lot that aren't, and they don't get it, and they look down upon kids as lesser because they don't know as much, or they think they don't know as much, and they're not near as materialistic, So they don't really, they don't think, oh, well, you're just naive. You really don't know what the real world's like. Well, the real world's what you make it, So that really has nothing to do with the price of tea in China. So they really can't say one way or the other that they are any better than the kids that they're demeaning.
Oh yeah, Tony. And in fact, that's what I always get. I don't like bringing up my personal stuff, but my girlfriend Deanna also plays the same demeanor all the time. And like that's what sometimes that happens. It's like, when did people become so age?
Ego gratification.
What, Khadija?
I said it's ego gratification. You wanna feel like you're better than someone younger than you because you're more powerful. You can say it, and they'll believe you.
Yeah.
And it feeds your ego.
That is true.
Now, here's what I also notice is that a lot of times, if you guys were to read Jesus' real biography, I also found out that he's also very involved with children a lot of times, and how he interact with them. Especially when Jesus talks to people, he always make reference that people should not prohibit those children from coming to me. They should come to me, as though they are my followers. For blessed are those who are like children, because for those who do, they will inherit the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah, I just did want to touch upon that. I don't think it was as much as followers as it was, they just looked up to him as somebody worthy to be recognized as a good influence. And I think that would be, that's important, because I don't think Jesus ever mentioned anything about worshiping him. So, he called us brothers and sisters and stuff. So, yeah, it really had nothing to do with worship. It had to do with trust. If a child wants to walk my way, walk in the way that I walk, and love unconditionally, let them. Because they understand it more so as a child than you do as an adult. But you can also learn, if you come to my understanding, come to me as a child, So, yeah, I totally get that.
Now, here's another thing that I notice about how learning experiences really differs for age differences. For example, when you're a child, here's the funny thing. When I teach a child a college concept like algebra or calculus, and I just teach it in a dry way, they just don't seem to receive that as well. When I start adding entertainment in there, where I make them do cardboard games, recreational activities, if you want to make it fun, half the time you retain that information better. But if you make them teach it and make them the role of the leader, they retain nearly 95% to 100% of what you teach out of the box. And not only that, they can do a lot better.
About the only thing I have a problem with there is you can't make them do anything. But when you involve them, they want to do it. So it's not really a making. It's just guide them into, wanting to do it. So
right. Yeah. Here's the funny thing. involving them in a dry way, like for example, making them do experimentations, like you see that in college and high school a lot. But if you were involved in them like as though it's a play, as though it's an activity, a leisure activity, it's a totally different story.
I think a more accurate way to be is getting them to do it, not necessarily making them. I don't like that word.
You just get them to do. Here's the funny thing: if you get them to do something that is fun, they always somehow like to do it, and they don't even care, if it's an activity regarding the learning material or not. They just like to have fun. And I found out a lot of times, even adults do that. Like those, especially those who are like below the age of 35, or a lot of them tend to still want to play,
Oh
even
yeah.
post. That's what I just don't get. Is how come like, most of these people are around those age, but not any older? I believe like older people can also have fun.
Well, it's just like that saying, it's cliche and it's not exactly always true, but the difference between men and boys is the size of their toys, But, that goes for women as well, as far as, like, stuff that we enjoy doing, we like having fun. We like to play. Some people are involved in sports, some like hang gliding, maybe it's more expensive, but some people like jumping out of a perfectly good airplane and going skydiving. But yeah, it's just a different form of play, but that's what it is. It's still play.
Right, and now, here's what's interesting is that when I taught the same concept that Michael brought up on sacred geometry to children, and instead of just simply just drawing it out, I actually get them involved where I make them draw it out themselves, like as though they're artists. What I noticed is that when they drew it out themselves, half the time when I asked them what is the seed of life, they knew exactly what I was talking about.
Right.
Nice.
It's almost remembered it, just like for years. They still remembered it. It's weird. Like, what do you think, Michael? Like, if you were to teach anyone, I believe like you can make it fun and see what happens. I just don't. That's what's weird about the human mind. It's like once you have fun.
Earlier, I was thinking about your question as in, like, what's your best experience with education? I was thinking about who were my best teachers. I never had a favorite, but I remember the best classes that I've had, like even in college, the best classes I've had are the ones where the teacher comes in and is really enthusiastic and makes it fun. She's interactive. And those are the classes where at the end of the class, everyone gives a standing ovation because they're so good. And because they made the class fun and they made it entertaining. Like literally the entire class will start clapping.
Oh yeah, and here's
So,
what I
it's
noticed is
true.
the same thing that you can use in your classroom can also be used in, like, for example, philosophy. I've seen philosophy where if you debate in philosophy, it's ridiculous. I've been in classes like that. Music, same thing. Involved in improvisation, that happens a lot. Where if you get one person to play music or piano, the whole class start improvising in their own ways. And then it gets more and more creative, and like people just want to come in.
Mhm.
Like, what is your take on this, Michael? Like, I wonder how do you teach classes, or how do you involve with displaying information to people? Because I know that you wrote a lot of blogs about spirituality, sacred geometry, and all that stuff. But how do you get people to learn these stuff quicker? Oh, Michael Lloyd.
So I've never really had an opportunity to teach sacred geometry other than through blogs and metaphysical bibble babble. The people I've been around in real life usually just let me blab on about it. They don't really subscribe to that kind of thinking. If I were to teach it, I would. I don't know. I guess I would have kind of interactive lessons. I would I would ideally like to teach through video or maybe through Hangouts, but I haven't really had an opportunity to teach a group of people about it. And honestly, I would hope it wouldn't be boring. Yeah, so you're asking me how I would teach sacred geometry in a classroom?
Yeah, because here's the thing. Just like how your subject is very interesting, teaching it to people is actually also the way you can raise a vibration very easily. And in fact, education is a very powerful tool. I'm not
So
joking.
in that case, kind of my first instinct would be to use comedy. I would do a stand-up routine and just be like, I would make little characters, like a hexahedron cube meets a dodecahedron, and they would represent people or minds, and then show that you can still be. Here's just the thing: we're all platonic solids anyway, in my opinion, and you can be a platonic solid in a state of conditional love or a state of unconditional love. The shape is not what matters. It's the state of conditions you place on yourself, and that's the filters that you give the world. Too many people are looking through two eyes and don't realize that the universe is a whole, and if you were to see things from the universe, it would kind of be like being able to see behind things. It would be knowing truth, essentially. And if you can know the truth inside, you will see the truth in others and their sources of pain. And I think when people try to confront other people about things they're doing wrong, they're trying to fix them. But you can only really fix yourself. And a lot of the way our system is set up is, when someone does something really wrong, we lock them up. We ignore them, and that only it keeps people in fear of making mistakes, first of all. And when they do, then their love of themselves diminishes because they did something wrong, and they know that if they feel that way about themselves, other people are probably going to feel that way about them. But I guess one of the things I realized when I was writing that blog is people are really a lot of the time focused on themselves. They're not as focused on other people's flaws as it may seem. When people point out a flaw in someone else, they're only pointing out a flaw in themselves because they see that flaw in themselves. And then the opposite of that is idolization. When you idolize someone else, you see those qualities and you mimic them, and celebrities are used for that. But we don't see that they're actually aspects of ourself. I don't know how I would teach that. I would like to have a lot of physical models, like a two-way mirror, but like the two-way mirror as a cube, so you can see inside of it and then see the reflections going back and forth. I would use something like that, and someone in a conditional state of love is stuck in that box and they're only seeing reflections of themselves, whereas unconditional love is the state outside of the box. You can see the box for what it is.
It's really cool.
That is what I was also thinking. It was like when Khadija brought up the fact of humor. I'll bet, okay, I don't know if you guys would, if some of you audiences out there who is watching this, like, who in here is a fan of spirit science? I know this has been repeated so many times in my shows.
Yes.
Okay, what about you?
I actually like it.
What
I
about you,
love
Deanna?
spirit science.
Deanna?
I don't agree
Well,
with everything, but I at least entertain it.
Are you a spirit science?
wait, what?
You in here know spirit science, I'm asking.
Oh, yeah. Like, I wouldn't say, like, everyone should watch it, but, like, it's kind of like that thing that you watch when you're bored and you're like, okay, what can I watch that's interesting and I can be entertained for a few hours.
See,
But
for me, I was definitely linking science and spirit to for myself, and I was like, why hasn't this been happening? Why aren't people realizing that science and spirit actually go hand in hand? And the reason we don't see that is because religion and science don't get along at all.
I know.
So for me, when I came across spirit science, it kind of bridged the gap, and Jordan's observations seemed, it was almost like he did the work for me. And I'm not saying that, that's the end-all be-all, because the universe is constantly unfolding. There's always going to be a new truth to discover. But for me, it was a starting point, and everything is a starting point. Religion is a starting point, science is a starting point, spirit science is a starting point.
Well, I think spirit science is a starting point for those who are first getting into it, but once you understand what's going on and once you're like at a certain point, then you look back and you're like, oh, it's funny how I didn't know this before, but hey, oh look. Like for me, I only seen a few episodes of Spirit Science because one of my teachers recommended it to me because I wasn't getting things that easy. And so my teacher, I kept asking my teacher stuff like, well, why do you think this happens? Well, what would happen if this happens? And then I kept on asking why and what would happen before. And then my teacher was like, okay, watch Spirit Science. And, what? So to me, I think Spirit Science gives answers to a certain extent, but, I think everyone should realize their own truth and their own opinion on it. You can't say, I don't know how much fact it is, and I don't know how much fiction it is, but I can definitely say it's interesting the way they put it. And it's interesting with their dynamics.
Now, here's what I noticed, guys, about spirit science and how they...
Yeah, got in.
Hi, Michael. How's
So
your rainbow beard?
Hey, Deanna.
Hey.
Hey, Tony. Hey, Michael. Hey. Hey, Khadija. Hey.
Hello.
Jenna. Hey. Insect Mine.
Daniel.
Oh, Daniel. Okay, I think that's everybody.
Yeah,
I got some
skipped
really
Andy.
interesting comments on the beard thing.
So here's the thing, guys, when spirit science, some of the videos that they created, here's what I noticed, is the reason why so many people view their channels and everything and also learn so quickly what they're teaching is because it's entertaining. Because half the time, think about it, most of their videos are made up of cartoon characters, which are actually real people, and it's pretty flashy to the eyes. So that's what makes people learn so quickly.
I love that it's simple too.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
simple
it's
and entertaining.
follow.
Well, simple to the point where it's a little too simplified, when I but
It's a great introductory way of presenting these ideas.
Okay, guys, I think when I was talking to Rex on
and I mean he does really add on the entertainment factor.
Now here's
and I think
the funny
that's
thing,
important.
Which is so genius and rare.
Because people are learning faster if they're entertained.
Yep.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
And here's
people learn faster if they're entertained.
Rex just brought up a good point about a group.
First, a joke.
Is that how many of you guys ever done a project in school where you, for example, built, if you're an architect or you built giant skyscrapers, or if you're an engineer, you do science fair stuff or science research, or I don't know. How many of you guys have experience with that?
I never built a skyscraper before, Andy.
For one time for a science project, the textbook
I don't even know if I built a pyramid in Egypt.
One time for a science project, my textbook said something about carbon and something else, and they were saying mix it vinegar with baking powder, and I accidentally almost blew up the kitchen.
Well, one thing that I can think about that I did in elementary school was everybody looked forward to it for like sixth
there
grade
you go.
because there was one guy and he was a math teacher, and what he taught basically was well, just
Gotta be
basic
careful with
math,
certain
but
chemicals.
he wanted to show how it applied to like rocketry. So we all had like rockets, like little model rockets that we made. And we could paint them whatever color we want. I think mine was like pink and purple. But it also flew the highest and won the contest. You know, I got this big Cherokee rocket that was like 3 foot long that I won because mine worked right. But I paid attention to detail and I got so involved with it. I've always had this thing where I could see stuff that was level, you know, just down to like just the fraction of an inch. So I was able to put the fins on it and everything to where they were, to my degree of perfection, which is pretty high. I use it like I told Michael Pratt plenty of times. You know, I have to just say that's good enough. You know, because I would be sitting there messing with it all during the period until, just on one fin, trying to get it to be straight. But yeah, I think it's important that you involve people or involve the students in something that they enjoy. You know, I had never really gotten into rocketry before, but I thought it was pretty cool. And so I actually, I enjoyed it. And I think that's important.
Can't hear you.
I think there's a brilliance in that itself.
Yeah, when you guys...
I think a lot of geniuses have that, like, kind of thing, like, wait a minute, it looks good, but it needs a little bit more of this, and a little bit more of that. And wait a minute, it looks good, but maybe a little something here, and it's just like, I think there's a brilliance in that itself because it's just like you're viewing things from all sorts of different angles. Well, another person might say, no, that looks good, but
like that's one of the few effective ways.
It's a craft, you know?
To do this,
You're perfecting your craft. As they say in masonry, I think.
Like seriously, you guys didn't realize, I don't know if you guys realize this, but like in many of the esoteric mystery schools, they also, and even in many of the ancient practices where people would, like for example, practice magic or study under a teacher, they always study under a group of students, not in like a study group or doing a group. They never do things on their own. It is funny. I don't know if like what is Jenna's views on this, but this is something that is so interesting. You know? Like we get people like there's something interesting happens. One side is like I know your strengths and I know your weaknesses, and at the same time, how we know what to do to work with one another.
You make it groovy.
You were kind of cut off, like, throughout what you're saying. You still are.
Groovy, baby.
You were, yeah, like from what we were talking about education, like,
yeah.
You're in a group.
Sound like Kanye West.
During like a group study, you always, there's two things that happens when you're in a group. First off, you're going to just know your strengths and weaknesses and everybody else. Second of all, you're going to
sound right.
You know how to like collaborate. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So that's the key thing about education is that it's empowerment, you know.
I'm saying your voice is way too loud.
Like the more you learn to involve your students, whether it's in groups, That's what I always do in my life coaching. Is that I always do group coaching. We never do individual for a reason because a lot of times interesting things always pops up when they're in groups.
That's true.
Second, that's why, like, second of all, like, we should have a classroom setting. People are interacting. People should be having fun. That's the third element of what a good education should look like.
Totally agree.
But I think a lot of it is going back to, well, it's like incorporating new methods, a new methodology, but also improving or going back to the true way of teaching. You know, they didn't have classrooms, you know, back in ancient times, so it's either in nature or, you know, certain ways you can do it indoors, but I'm saying methodology is a little bit different. There's no raising your hand or anything like that.
Maybe there's like a cool new way of changing the education system with technology.
Right, and
I see that. I definitely see that.
can you tell the audience, like, before we have to end this call, is that if you really are that interested in what education looks like, go to the Platonic Academy or learning from the ancients how they taught their students, because that's how we should taught our students today. It's when you teach your students how to think, that means you have to, it's not about just like regurgitating information. It's not about entering into data. It's about learning how to use it. It's like building software. That's what one article that I read is that it's about building a software where you can build and reproduce some of your best works. That's the goal of what education is. And if anyone who wants to contribute, please leave a comment, subscribe to my channel, and we'll get back to you sooner or later. Thanks for watching.